G'day guys, Daikaiju Down Under here. In today's video, we will be taking a look at this figure right here. This is my custom Ebirah figure, a figure that I haven't really showcased on the channel before. I believe he had a brief cameo in my massive collection video, but that's about it. I figured it's about time we do a review on him. I'll talk about the paint, I'll talk about the new sculpted elements, we'll do some size comparisons and all of that fun stuff. Sounds good? Let's get into it. So you might not notice it at first, but there's actually a fair few modifications that I made to this figure in those sculpted details, right? So we'll start with Ebirah's right claw, just because that's the biggest and the most prominent. As you can see, I've thickened up Ebirah's right claw. I've given that right claw just a lot more sort of meat, a lot more power. Now, that was done to replicate, one, real-life crustaceans, how they do sort of usually have the big crushing claw and then the smaller shearing claw. But two, I believe that's something that the Showa design for Ebirah had, and that's something that I wanted to replicate on this figure. So you can even see that here, looking at the left claw. This one's actually remained pretty much intact from the original plastic model kit that this figure is based off of. The only additional sculpting I've done with the two-part epoxy that I normally use is just adding a little bit of length to that bottom sort of bladed area there, just to give it that stabby effect, right? On the right hand claw though, all of this has been bulked up and all of this has been bulked up. Even the tip of the claw is pretty much completely gone. I believe most of that is new sculpt, with the only additional, or only remaining bit rather, being those couple little spikes there. So, and that goes around the entire thing. So the entire right claw is completely bulked up, completely thickened up, and it does give this claw a little bit of weight. Ebirah can't really hold his hand up. I mean, he can here sometimes, but as you see, it does sort of flop down after a while. Now, how I did that, again, using the normal two-part epoxy I do, all I really did was, after getting the general shape, was just put some little holes into it. I just stabbed it with a toothpick just to get those sort of holes in there, and then using the excess filament that sort of came off, rolled those into little balls and put those on the claw itself, just to give them a little bit more texture and a little bit more spiking. So I actually went over the claws here with a metal wire brush, and the handle on that actually had a really nice sort of grid pattern on it, and then rolling that over the epoxy actually gave that really nice sort of sculpted detail there. And then that was the same effect used on this left claw here, just to give it just a little bit extra sculpted detail. Now, the rest of the sculpted effects are all on Ebirah's head. So zooming in here, as you can see, not too much additional sculpt work was done here. So this pit here where the whiskers plugged into, that's been left the same. I just sort of, instead of inserting them into the face of the model kit like you're supposed to, I left them out and actually plugged them into the two-part epoxy when it was still drying. And then that's how I got that effect of having the whiskers pointing backwards as they should be. Now, what I sculpted isn't actually anything too special. It's nothing to really write home about. All I did really was just stab it with a toothpick again, except this time leaving those holes a lot more noticeable. I did sort of leave a slit sort of in the middle there on purpose, just to break up that texture there, because without it, it would just look like a big brick moustache and it wouldn't look great. You got to imagine Ebirah's mouth is probably in there, under there somewhere. So that wasn't really too difficult to do, and I think that actually blends pretty well with the figure, and that's just because you've got so much other detail sort of going on there. You've got the eye, you've got these whiskers coming through, you've got these tiny little hands there, so it sort of distracts you from it. And then the two big claws are obviously sort of focal features, right? And then the final bit of additional sculpting and sculpt work that I did was just this claw sort of spike, whatever you call it, sort of on the skull. Well, I guess Ebirah doesn't have a skull, does he? But on the top of Ebirah's head here. So that was done the same way. Just plop some of that two-part epoxy there, pick at it. I did a little more picking than normal, just because I really wanted to give it a rough texture. And then I added more of those little sort of bumps and grooves on it, and then textured up the tip of that a little bit. And that was it. That's all the additional sculpt work that went into Ebirah. So once that was done, I sprayed the entire thing in a matte grey primer, painted Ebirah up red, and then did some dry brushing over the top of it before moving on to the whiskers here. So the whiskers, these front whiskers here, and the underside of Ebirah, that all got a nice brown sort of yellow on top of it, with another layer of slightly lighter dry brushing on the tip of that as well, just to really bring out those details. And then on the end of Ebirah's tail here as well, same thing. We've got more of that detail right on the end there, just on those sort of whisker frilly bits, same color there. So Ebirah is basically only really two colors. You've got the main red for the body, and then you've got that sort of tannish brown for the underside and the whiskers there. And then the eyes themselves, they're just a lighter red, just to really sort of emphasize them, otherwise they'll just blend in with the body. And I think it actually looks really good. I mean, from a distance, when you put this next to a Godzilla figure, it looks like Ebirah, you get the point. So what we'll do now is we'll quickly take a look at the articulation. So there's a large amount of moving parts on Ebirah, but unfortunately you don't really get the most out of them, just given the general design and shape and overall sort of function of the model kit. So as you saw before, the claws themselves, they do have a hinge, so Ebirah can pinch and crush things with both claws. That's very nice. At what I guess you could almost call the elbow joint of the arm, you do again have another hinge here, so those come in and out, and that's present on both sides. You also have a bend, sort of a reverse bend of an elbow. On the right arm, it's too heavy to hold that joint up, but it does work just fine on the left. So you've already got 3 movements in the arms there. And then flipping Ebirah onto his back, you can see all of these joints here. So every single segment in that main body is on a ball joint. So this leg's on a ball joint, ball joint, ball joint, ball joint. Same for that side there. The 2 main arms are also on ball joints, so you can sort of pivot them up and down and move them in and out. That's sort of the only range you get on those though, unfortunately, and that's again just because of the general shape and design of the creature and model kit itself. But these front little mandibles here, they also move. And then moving on to the tail, you also have a bunch of ball joints here, so you can curl Ebirah's tail there, so that looks pretty cool. You can get some sort of cool poses out of that. And then now, unfortunately, because it is a model kit, these do sort of tend to come off when moving them. Anyway, all of those little teeny tiny claws, those little teeny tiny legs, they're on swivels. And then finally at the tip of the tail, these fan out. So you can fan out Ebirah's tail if you wanted to. I think it looks a little weird, so I usually keep them that way. So that's pretty much it. So you do get a little bit of articulation out of Ebirah. It's not a lot, it's not spectacular, but you can get some pretty interesting poses out of it. You can sort of make him look like he's walking. You can have him crushing things in the air. You can have him fighting other kaiju and whatnot. So you do get a little bit out of the articulation. Let's move on to some size comparisons. So here's a good example of what I was talking about in the beginning of the video. Ebirah being very smushed and flat to the ground, especially compared next to a standard 6-inch Bandai vinyl Godzilla figure. This here is the 50th anniversary memorial box Godzilla 1965. When looking at each other face on, Ebirah doesn't really look that imposing, but when you flip the figure on its side, you get a better sort of sense of the scale here. Then turning the figures to the front here, you can see that the Ebirah figure itself isn't small, it's just a little bit smushed and flat to the ground. Here we have Ebirah compared next to the figure we looked at in my previous review. This is the premium Bandai Movie Monster Series Shimo from the Shimo Scar King 2-pack. Again, Ebirah is very small. Flipping him on his side here is still pretty small compared to this slightly larger than normal sized Bandai Movie Monster Series figure. And here we have Ebirah compared next to another smaller custom figure that I've made. This here is my custom SH MonsterArts styled Shin Godzilla 5th form figure. And that's pretty much all I've got for today's video, guys. What do you think of this custom here? Did I do a good job? Does it look like Ebirah? Let me know down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, let me know what other videos you want to see. I've got plenty of Bandai vinyl figures that I can take a look at. I've got heaps of SH MonsterArts figures. I've even got a couple HIYA Toys Godzilla figures that I haven't looked at yet. So let me know what you want to see on the channel, and I'll try my best to get those videos done. I've been Daikaiju Down Under, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.